Hi, everybody. As you've already heard, I'm Matt Heusser.
Justin Rohrman.
I'm the managing director at Exelon Development, and Justin's my chief of staff. We're a three-person company. But today we want to talk about agile test evolution and changing test strategy over time. What I mean by that is we are incremental people. We are continuous improvement people. We are small changes and experiments people. That's kind of how we think. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So when I hear we're doing Scrum, we're going Agile, we're going to flip the switch tomorrow and it's all going to be different. So, okay, that's not necessarily bad. It's good. But what I hear in the back of my mind is there's a lot of change is going to happen very quickly. And a lot of unvalidated decisions that we're going to do it. If what testing does is we solve delivery problems and we solve business problems, those problems are going to change. We're not really here to talk about best practices because what you need to do will change. In fact, the really neat idea you have the first week after you go Agile, you might not even need 2 or 3 years later. So we are able to talk about is some patterns we've seen, very specifically the problems that tend to be introduced for tests when we try to go Agile, and then some patterns of solutions that tend to change over time. But we kind of need to have a shared understanding of what we mean by go Agile. So we're going to use Scrum because it's the most popular, most commonly understood of the methods. We should probably explain what we mean by Scrum in a minute and a half. So,
A minute and a half.
What's Scrum?
Sure. So if I take a really casual look at Scrum, I probably think about the daily stand-up. And usually it's either completely benign, just no value add, or it's exactly like the Thunderdome from Mad Max, just people rattling the cages, ready to battle. But if I
sometimes it's let me show you how hard I worked. I worked really, really hard.
Right.
I
Or
did
they're
all the
just
things.
arguing over what should be done in a status meeting. But if I take a closer look, it's actually a tool for cranking up the speed on software delivery, and it gives us very specific ways of doing that. So we take work that used to be done in 3 or 4 months, break it into little bitty pieces, and figure out how to do some of that in 2 weeks and actually deliver it to production. We take teams of people that were previously separated on separate corners of a floor or separate buildings or different parts of the world even. And we smash them together and figure out how to create smaller groups that have all of the skills that they need to create a feature on their own without reaching out and later calling a DBA to create a database table or whatever. And then you add a little ceremony to that, like the retrospectives, planning sessions to get insight into how the work is doing and what we can change to go faster next time. And that's kind of Scrum in a nutshell.
In a minute and a half.
Minute and a
Not
half.
bad for a minute and a half, right? So what problems does that introduce, and then how do we see ourselves fixing them? Right? Oh, you just did that slide. Good job. First problem that I tend to see on a team, if all you do is you say, take that minute and a half description, send people to a day of training, and we're going to implement the Scrum thing. We're going to do this using real examples from real customers where possible, and we're going to use real artifacts that have been grayed out or blurred out with a preference for physical, things you can touch and see instead of screens for lots of reasons, which I'll get into later. But this is an actual delivery board for a team that I was working with in northern Indiana. Oh, no, that's the wrong button. There is no laser pointer on here. Every column is a different stage in the delivery process. So you have test case creation, which we'll talk about, delivery, code review, QA, ready to go, and out the door. So teams, what we've seen teams do, this happens over and over again. We're going to do Scrum. 2 weeks, we'll get it ready to production. And the second week, probably Friday, all of the stories get dumped into test.
Would you call that a bottleneck?
Yes, test is the bottleneck. Why is test taking so long? The testers then work really, really hard because they have a sprint commitment to meet. So the testers work all day Friday, all the Saturday, Sunday afternoon, they find a showstopper bug. We come into Monday, we can't ship because we found a showstopper. Right? That's not great, right?
It's not exactly a bottleneck either. It's just last.
Right.
The release can't go out because you found out too late.
Right. So bottleneck has a specific mathematical meaning. Like if we did 20 stories in 2 weeks, and the testers can get 4 stories out of test per day,
yep.
Then they are not the bottleneck because they're keeping up.
Yeah, they're not actually constraining anything.
But if you get them all Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Duh.
Yeah. Right. So what do we do? This is an image from my chapter of Beautiful Testing, which chapter 16, and it's available as a free PDF if anybody wants to get it. But when I was at Social Text for 3 years, this is a O'Reilly book on what the time was sort of the cutting edge practices. We thought this was good. It worked for us. We went to production 50 out of 52 2-week sprints. So for 2 years, we didn't make it a couple of Christmases. But at the beginning of the sprint, you'd have all this product owner planning activity and then coding going on. So we would do regression testing at the beginning of the next sprint. We called it a parallel pipeline. We thought we were smart. And if you're skilled and have some discipline and can really do it, it kind of inhibits collaboration because you're working on different sprints and you've got some branch management to do. But it worked for us. Then I went into a company, started there in West Michigan a few years later, and we were talking about the parallel pipeline. They said, yeah, we're doing the parallel pipeline. So what we've got right now is we're regression testing sprint 20 while we're story testing sprint 21, while the developers are working on sprint 22, while the business analysts are working on sprint 23, while the PMs are on sprint 24.
And if you find problems.
And the executives are on sprint 25. Oh, and ops is trying to get sprint 19 to production while we're trying to patch sprint 18 in production. Right? 60-person team, 8-figure project.
Failures just cascade both ways.
So if you think of your work in progress, when you're doing Scrum, your team of 60 times 2 weeks, it's 120-person weeks work in progress. You can have 120-person weeks work in progress. I got to do some math. 60 times 2 times 8, like several 100-person weeks work in progress, possibly 1,000, something like that. This is a big number. And we're using, you can misconfigure any tool. Excuse me. We're using a tool called Jira. Some of you have heard of that. And they were organized as teams. You had the test team and the developer team and the project analyst team. And you would just look at your filter for stuff that was in test. So you only saw a 2-week view. So I went to one of the leads and said, we've got to visualize this. We've got to get a board like the board I showed you before. We got physical artifact to demonstrate what's really going on so we can see all of it. And we had a whiteboard about as big as the wall behind you. We can come in on Saturday, and so get some cards and print them out. We've got a print feature in the thing, we'll stick them on the wall. And management said, we can't do it because it wouldn't fit.
Wall's not big enough to put all
Wall
the
is not big
on
enough for your work in progress. It's got too much work in progress, right? So test was behind, and they brought me in to catch test up. Right, at least shrink the accordion, and that's what we're going to talk about next.
Add another person to it, basically do more work faster.
Well, that was the initial ask, yeah. But there were systemic reasons that we were getting where we were, which we worked on. So we want to ship every 2 weeks, and actually during the interview, I don't know if I told you this story. During the interview, we talked about test takes too long. Well, is it really testing, right? Like if I had a spoon and the spoon represented testing, and I could make testing free, You press a button, test results instantly form. They're filed in Jira automatically, right? Well, you still got to triage them and figure out what you're going to fix. And you got to do the fixing and then get that on staging, and then you press the button.
Figure out if your results are actually good.
And then you press the button again, right? How many times do we have to press that button per release? And how much would the test process actually shrink in cost? Right? Not as much as we would hoped, because we have to keep doing refixing, right? It wasn't test that was the bottlenecks, it was all the fixing. Well, why do we have to fix? We had too many bugs. This is John Seddon. He's a professor of I think, psychology in the United Kingdom. He did research on public sector call centers. And you may have experienced this. So what they did was, in the United Kingdom, they outsourced customer service to Ireland, which was 25 cents per transaction. So you call the customer service center, which is some faraway place, and you have a question which you think is kind of common, and they say, oh, that's not on my list of things I can do. They put you on hold, they transfer you somewhere else, they transfer you again. That person solves your problem. You have to wait for the letter in the mail in 2 weeks. The letter doesn't come in the mail. You wait 3 weeks. You call them back. You transfer. You finally get your problem solved. So switching to the call center, transactions are 25 cents on the dollar, right? But the example I just gave you, we didn't have one transaction. We had 8. So it costs $2. So Seddon's research was, specifically when you outsource to save costs in that manner, for those reasons, under those conditions, costs go up. The last 7 of those transfers only happened because the first one didn't succeed.
It went wrong.
Right. The first one should have solved my problem. I shouldn't have had 8 transactions. I should have had 1. So he calls those last 7 failure demand. Now, I've got a lot of work on the impossibility of complete testing. We're not going to be able to test everything, nor are we mathematically going to be able to write software that's perfect from the get-go. Most software I work with, most of the time, can get a lot better before the first exploration by a human.
Talking about first-time quality?
Yes. So if we've got these, we want to get it done in 2 weeks as a start. That's the beginning of Agile, and then go faster from there. We've got to get this fine, fixed retest cycle tight. And reducing failure demand by improving first-time quality would be it's going to have to happen for us to get there,
yep.
Right? Otherwise, we're going to say we're going to test a sprint behind, and then we're going to have to manage all these feature branches, and some executive's going to be upset that we're going slow. Because we are.
So if you do Agile without adding all of the common practices, never get rid of your failure demand if you're not doing shifting testers left so they can help find requirements problems earlier, getting programmers to do TDD, BDD so they can find code problems earlier and design their product better. You're not going to get rid of that failure demand.
Right.
Or even reduce it.
And we're going to talk about that right after this next video. There's one more problem that we see when we shift from annual release cycles or quarterly release cycles into releases all the time, and that is that we have to do support with the changes we just implemented 2 weeks ago while we're trying to do today's work. And this video demonstrates that.
Some people like to climb mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high.
Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing.
You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards,
owls. These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
I get a lot of thanks up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, I look in his eyes, that's all the thanks I need.
EDS. managing the complexities of the digital economy.
I don't even think EDS is a thing anymore. But the video's nice. It's on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed it. And it's accurate. It describes the challenges that we're dealing with, right? First set of advice came out after the Agile Manifesto was signed. This is the first Agile testing book. Lisa Crispin's still around. I think Tip House has one of those day job things. He's not speaking about it so much.
Gotta get rid of that.
Yeah. But talking to Lisa over the years, we're still figuring out how to explain this stuff. So that book literally has a chapter called Manual Tests. And the entire content of those chapters is one sentence, which is don't have any. That's been misinterpreted and misunderstood. I mean, imagine you're in a demo meeting with the customer, and he says, I wonder what happens if they leave the middle name blank, right?
Sounds like manual testing.
And can you try just leaving the manual name blank and clicking submit? Like, we're not going to say, stop! We have to automate that. We don't do any manual testing. We'll let you know in a week and a half. We're not going to do that, right? So what did Lisa really mean when she said no manual testing? What she says is a human being has to do it. You follow a script to the letter and report results and check a checkbox and say, yeah, I did that. I don't think you should be automating all of those. That's a lot of cultural change if that's what you're used to. Yeah. And what do you do instead? So John Bach suggested we talk about this dichotomy between exploring, which is scary, and on a big project, how do you manage it? And just do all the steps and check the checkbox that you did that, and now you've completed 1 out of 100, which we'll call pure scripted, which is over to the left. So if we want to compress the amount of time it takes for us to do release testing, and we have to do release testing because failure demand is high. We make a change over here, it breaks something over there, it's unpredictable, it's really important. Rollback is hard and expensive, so we've got to do regression testing because failure demand is high. That's going to change when we get rid of or reduce failure demand. But for now, how are we going to do this 2-week thing? Well, move toward the right. So provide less detail in those. One company I worked with, instead of double-click on Internet Explorer, wait for a page to load, type in www.amazon.com, hit enter, see page load, see search box, click on search box, see cursor blink, type in, I'm bored just telling you that. It didn't have a lot of value, and when the UI changed, it all became out of date. So this is maintenance burden. So either your test scripts become out of date, or we have to spend a lot of money updating them. And we just can't afford to do that. So what would we do instead? We'll just start with the actual test case is search for a book that has both a Kindle, a hardcover, and an Audible edition. Add them all to your shopping cart. Order them all and see if you got all 3 of them.
Convert it to giving guidance or giving a mission, but not explicit details of the streets they turn on and the trees they look for when they're going somewhere.
Right. And as we continue to move to the right, we get toward, you just have the piece of logic that actually is needed, the setup piece. You need to know I still need to know how to set up this kind of user ID with these permissions. And once that's set up, you can do the thing. 2 charters, which are explore feature as role to uncover risk. Further and further to the right, and we'll talk about, as you move to the right, how the heck do you manage play with it for a large app?
There are varying contexts where each of these styles makes more sense.
Yep.
If you can't afford any failure demand, if you're working on a pacemaker, you're probably going to be more scripted and more rigorous than if you're working on the next version of Flappy Birds.
And a lot of this is also skill development, where you're working with a team over time and coaching them. They're able to move to the right, which they can move faster, lighter, cheaper, while we have to devise ways to provide management the transparency on what the risks were and what we did and what we thought the consequences were.
You're saying hashtag shift right.
Yeah, or we need, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. We got too much failure demand. So maybe you've been in this scenario where this happened. It actually happened with the client. I guess I can talk about this. We had the send the email button, and I'm the tester, and I click the button, and I don't get the email. And I go to the developer, and he says, well, of course, you're not going to get the email. Submit just submits it to the email queue. We need a story to flush the email queue to send those out. Going, well, the story's called send the email, right? And well, they need to talk to the product owner. And we bring the product owner over. And that's clearly tired, exhausted. His hair is disheveled. He's having a bad day. And so this story, send the email, was written because the previous story, email sending form, didn't send the email either. Can we just send it? The developer's saying, story for next sprint. So I had that column test case creation, which is a professional name. If you work in a business that needs to use a professional term, you could call it that. George Dinwiddie wrote the original paper on the three amigos, being the developer, tester, and the product owner, getting them together before the code is written to build a shared understanding of what the software will do. And there's a ton of books on this, and they tend to focus on the tooling and the automation, and that's great. My interest is the shared understanding. So when we have that conversation, the developer says, you're right. That was the goal. The goal is not accomplished. I'm going to fix it. You prevent a stupid argument. But better yet, you don't have that problem in the first place. Reduce failure demand. We got to reduce failure demand to actually be able to do some of these things. Otherwise, we make these ridiculous compromises, and we end up with the things we heard about on the panel with the Agile fall or whatever.
A lot of the focus of the E groups, right? The goal isn't to build Gherkin scripts that will run automated checks.
That's a side product.
Eventually, the goal is to create a communication framework to help them find these problems earlier.
Exactly. Did we cut the slide? No, we didn't. Good. There's a ton of books on this. You just pick a book. They're all good. They focus on different things. The spec by example book is the humans and the process. Most of the other books are the tools. We can make the slides available if you want them later. So I mentioned this Friday at 4, boom, here's all the stories. Why are you taking so long? It's only been 30 seconds problem, right? Common fix for that we see is to actually create hard limits on work in progress. All the X's you see on the screen are hard work in progress limits. So you can only have 2 of these things happening at one time. So here's what happens. The programmer sprinting ahead. Oh, in Scrum, our focus is on the delivery of working software to the customer, not I finished my piece of the thing.
Pushing to prod.
Right. So the programmer has got, there's 4 columns in dev, 4 columns in test, right? Testers can do 4 things at one time. Testers are full up. Developers are full up. Programmer finishes his thing. Great, I'm going to shove that into QA. Well, I can't because there's a work in progress limit. This is physical boards cause material differences in behavior because there's no slot. There's an X on it. Whereas with certain tools, you just click the override button.
Drag another card into the column.
Right. We've done consulting for companies that had lean training 3 weeks before, and there was no evidence that they understood this concept. Pages and pages. Let us show you in TFS our Kanban board that is pages and pages long. So we use this illustratively. You could use this in your tool. Having the physical illustration tends to help it transfer better, and it's vendor neutral. You can use whatever tool you want. You don't have to push a tool. So we like that. He wants to take on more work, but he can't because he wants to push it to QA, but he can't because QA is full, which leaves him for it in dev. So he wants to pull more work for dev, but he can't because dev is full. He's got to do something else, right? So we have mathematically identified where the bottleneck is. And what you do when you find a bottleneck is not yell at it and ask it annoying questions, right? That's not flow theory. But instead, you keep it busy, take any work off of the bottleneck you can, and add any resources you can, right? So someone earlier said, and I was get the developers working on tooling and automation to help you go faster, right? So this is really a pain to do through the UI, to do the setup for me to do the testing. And a customer, 95% of his day was setup, right? Well, if you do this, the programmer has extra time. He can work on R&D, he can work on Slack, he can work on morale things, but he might also write a tool to help me just do setup really fast from the command line, or better yet, create a text file that I run in through a program and bam, my setup is done. Right? Make the whole team go faster. Or they could help test, which is okay.
Good.
So you could put them on something low risk, so they get done really fast, or you could pair with them.
Or you pair up. Developer and tester are working together, so you get interesting feedback.
Let them lead for a while, say, why is this taking so long? It's super easy. It's done. And then, what about this? What about that? What about that? What about that? Oh, there's more to this testing thing. It's a skilled activity. That's a good lesson.
Even more, if you do pair up, sometimes you can get bugs fixed right away instead of having to work the politics of triage to get them done later.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and that would tighten your find, fix, retest loop, actually. Right. You just fix it right there. Pair together, fix it right there. Yeah, good point.
Exactly.
Great. Another one, when we talk about automation, if you Google automation, how do I do it? You'll probably typically find it's drive the user interface, which is really slow and brittle. It's got that maintenance problem where the test stops being an automated test and becomes a change detection unit. And the job of the programmer is to create change. So you get all these failures in your automated GUI test, and it's because there's a new required field, and the story is called add new required field. And you got to go fix the automated test up.
Even when that is not happening so much, there are patterns of failure, like timing and finding things on the screen that are really, really difficult to get past.
Right. So we like end-to-end GUI tests. Don't get us wrong. But we find typically some applications have a ton of business logic and a ton of possible permutations. You want to run 100 permutations of these combinations of things in a logical table. If you can separate the user interface, which the human can explore, from the business logic, and then test the business logic at the API level, that's going to run faster, it's going to be less brittle.
Yep. I could put 100 values into a CSV file, feed them into a small script, to pump it through an API endpoint, and run 100 tests in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and you might, this is a tool called Fitness, you might tie this into your Jenkins, to your continuous integration to run this overnight or on every check-in or every half an hour. Fitness is a free open source tool. I had a lot of success with it, had some stories about it that I could tell you this afternoon. This is a low-tech testing dashboard that we developed with an actual client. The final version, it got bigger because we kept adding supported OSs. This is illustrative. This is a Google Doc. And we put some Google script into it so that when you selected quality from a drop-down, eventually it would change the colors, scale of 1 to 10, and coverage changes the darkness of it. And what you can't see to the right is the bug IDs linked there. It features on the left. So when we said we're going to do a quick regression run-through, we're going to move toward an exploratory manner of working, well, we need some way to express to management what our coverage is. Like, can you ship? It's Friday at noon. We really want to know, can you ship? And you have a stupid argument, right? But you show this, you put it on a monitor, they can look at it, and they can say, we don't have enough coverage on path to purchase. We got to do something about that. We can't ship. You need more time. Okay, boss, if you say so.
Or maybe that's not as important as we thought it was.
Yes. That's, you don't have much coverage on search tagged elements.
Probably okay.
I'm not that worried about that. And then you get a bug in production. This happened to me when I was at Social Text, and our vice president of CEO was acting vice president of engineering because the VPE had just left. And why didn't QA find that bug came up? And the CEO of the company says, Matt informed me of that risk, and we made a calculated decision to go forward. End of conversation. Right? If we hadn't had that level of visibility and transparency into our work, I think the conversation might have gone differently. This is what we tend to see when we had failure demand is high. We need some way of measuring the coverage for that regression testing. Not going to talk about story testing much today. I'm sorry, we just don't have a ton of time. But we need some kind of measure of coverage to make make it transparent to senior management. There's lots of ways to do this. We're just going to show a couple in the time we have. And there are, QASymphony has tools that do similar things that you might want to look into if you're not using them already. There's lots of these. Or you could build it yourself.
Or even that's a good supplement to what you're already, add just a little bit different type of knowledge to what you're already working on.
Right, yeah, I think that the QASymphony product is a mind map so that you could actually change the amount of coverage that you have. Red, yellow, green, right? Another way to do it, this is a Kanban board. So same team, actually. We were taking a week to do regression testing. Gosh, big bug in production, afraid of failure demand. Can you guys test everything in 4 hours? We could.
Probably won't be very good.
That dashboard's not going to be a whole lot of value. It could be a bunch of ones, or like, what do you want us to do? Everybody came up with ideas for risks to explore in a way that someone else could understand, that would fit on a sticky note. We dot voted them. Everybody got 3 votes. The riskiest things, you got more votes. We sorted them, and then every tester pulled something from to do to in progress, and we ran them across the wall. If you had an idea for something to test, well, then you add it to the wall. An executive could come by, see exactly what we're doing this afternoon, and say, that's really important, and physically move a sticky. They could write their own stickies. And when we had the huddle, and what we actually did was thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways, are we comfortable going forward? We could review what was left on the wall, not done. Because hopefully, you always have more time, more ideas than you have time, right? I mean, that's, if you don't have more ideas than you have time, like we
come up with more ideas.
We do training on test design. Yeah. It's another way to visualize coverage. Another way to visualize, this is actually not coverage, but risks and coverage, right? So what we're saying here is we have to handle high failure demand and then medium failure demand under tight conditions. And what we eventually would like to get to is to a place where we have reduced mean time between failure, and we've reduced mean time to recovery. So we have a problem in production, it only impacts a small number of people. We know how to find that problem and roll it back or fix it quickly. We've also got the system isolated so that a change over here isn't going to break something over here. Relative confidence in that, right? So we separated the user interface from the API so we can deploy one API at a time. There's a bunch of techniques we're using there. I threw out a ton of stuff. But the basic idea is we create layers of protection so that any individual problem, testing isn't the last resort.
So we've introduced a lot of layers, though.
Right.
So you don't have to introduce every layer all at once. You can pick the one that's valuable to you.
Yeah, this is time. Right, exactly. And this is like the end of, these are patterns that we're going to change over time that we've seen companies. A few of the companies we work with have worked through these patterns. So they're at this point where we can deploy a change, deploy multiple changes per day with reasonably low risk. And so testing needs to adapt when we get over there, and that typically means more tooling, right? More automation.
Or testability features from development.
And really thinking strategically about risk, right? Instead of like, we test every story in this way. What are the ongoing what are the risks to the stability of the system, and how can we manage our time best to reduce those? All right, we didn't have time for crowdsourced testing or Q&A, but the good news is we'll be here all day. And if we brought something up that either it didn't sound right to you or we just didn't have enough time for it, just come sit at our table at lunch. We like to talk.
Yep.
This picture, I like this picture. My graphic designer actually said she could get me a better stock photograph. I said, yeah, but my daughter Katie is on the left, and my daughter Rachel's on the right, and this picture was taken at Pine Trails Elementary School. I don't think you can get me a better stock photograph. And I've seen them change. As a parent, I've had to adapt my parenting style over time. I'm not worried they're going to starve to death. I'm not worried. I don't have to change their diapers anymore. That's good. But I can't really send them to their room anymore. Like, if I send Katie to her room, I'd have to pick her up. And she's 13. So what I do has to change. Today what we want to do is just give you a taste of some of the tech problems we've seen and some of the techniques that we've seen to address those and how they change over time, with enough information for you to ask more educated questions about what you need to do in your environment as a next small step. Missing anything?
You got it.
Should we sing the jingle? No?
If you want to.
You guys, raise your hand if you want to hear the jingle.
Oh,
not many hands are up. Raise your hand if you don't.
One.
Right.
You don't count.
So more hands were up than not. So you'll do the chorus, and the second time through the chorus, when I go like that, the whole audience has to join in. All right? Is that fair?
That's better.
All right. You can have anything you want.
At Exelon Development.
You gotta learn to sing. You can have anything you want.
At Exelon Development.
You just sign right up, we're hard to miss. The fun never stops on our mailing list. You can have anything you want at development. Thanks everybody, God bless you.